Howdy, Ags. Welcome to the Tailgate, home of Aggie Football. We're back. We're back. Been on a little bit of a hiatus here lately. Corey's been working 2 jobs and trying to raise 3 kids. And I don't know if you know this, but my main gig is as a tax attorney, and I have been in the process of starting my own tax controversy firm in San Antonio. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months, and unfortunately hadn't had the time to come in and get the podcast moving during the off season. But we've got some time now that football's coming, we got to get it going. So here we are. And in regards to the new firm, today's sponsor for the show is Pacini Tax Controversy Group. If you have a problem with the IRS, call PTCG for help. Experienced, passionate, dedicated tax attorney. Visit the website at PaciniTaxGroup.com or call the office at 210-420-9586. Let them know Ags Tailgate sent you. Don't forget, folks, as always, email us at agstailgate@gmail.com or get on the YouTube channel. Subscribe. You can also leave comments on the YouTube channel. We will respond to every one of those. If you've got a question or a topic that you'd like to see on the show, just let me know. So today's rundown, we're going to look back at the offseason a little bit, and then we're going to look forward to 2025. With regards to the offseason, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the commentary that's been going on, some of the things that we've heard from Mike Elko and the staff, and as well as the players. So and then we're going to try to at least get a very brief look at sort of what we think about as far as 2025 football season and where we think these things need to go. Obviously, as we go forward here and closer to the season, we'll get more and more in depth with regards to that. Today I want to start the show off with a positive note. So let me start with my belief in Marcel Reed. Even before last season, we talked a lot about here on the show, on the tailgate, that I personally thought Marcel was the guy that would ultimately take the reins in that quarterback competition. I'm a big fan of Connor Wigman, the guy he is, the person he is. I think he's going to have a great amount of success over at U of H. But I'm a bigger believer in Marcel. And the reason being is that he's got this moxie about him, right? He's got this moxie. He's got the running ability that's crazy, but there's something about an attitude and his work ethic and his team first mentality. And so I love Marcel. I think the dude is a playmaker. I think the dude is going to be a star in this league. I think the dude is going to be an NFL quarterback. I like the tools that he brings to this team. I expect a phenomenal year out of Marcel. It to a certain extent, specifically with regards to the numbers, right? I mean, when you start looking at numbers, you gotta wonder what's Colin Klein going to do for him, right, to help him put up numbers. But remember, this isn't about numbers. This is about winning football games. And so will Colin Klein improve this in his second year as far as being able to call the plays for Marcel Reed? And I think specifically, and we'll talk more into that, what that means, is he going to put him in a position to, get this team over the hump? And so, to me, that's the big thing this year. I don't think you guys as Aggie fans should have any doubt whatsoever about Marcel Reed. Don't worry. He's going to do his things. And we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later in the show. A few other things that we saw throughout the offseason. Elko at some point made the statement that we need to have more NFL players on the roster. Well, it's not a lack of players and it's not a lack of talent. Here at A&M so far in the last 10 years, maybe longer than that, since Sumlin, has been around, there's been a lack of development, right? You see every year where, whether it was Jimbo, whether it was Sumlin, like a bunch of new freshmen taking over spots and everything else, because they were highly recruited kids. The problem with that is that the guys that got older and older didn't get better. This team had not developed as they should have from year to year. And then not only that, from beginning of season to end of season. And you go look at that track record, and that's just a fact. They start off strong because the talent is there. Other teams start to develop as a team throughout the year, and they get better, and the Aggies have not done that. And it's now on the coaching staff to actually get these players to develop. But here's the big thing with that comment by Elko. We need more NFL players. Teams that win have more NFL players on the roster, more NFL draftees on the roster. Well, the problem is that he's got it backwards, right? He's saying we got to acquire the NFL players so that we can become a winning program. In reality, winning programs get a lot of players drafted to the NFL. And that's the difference, right? So if he wins, if he produces on the field, if he does the things that need to happen in order for this team to be successful on the field, these players will get drafted. And, last year we get 3 defensive linemen drafted first, second, third round. And those guys weren't productive on the field here at A&M, and that reason is not because they're not talented enough to be a first, second, and third rounder. They definitely are, and I think they'll start to show that in the NFL. And other guys that have done it, Michael Clemens and different guys out there. So we need to start putting them in a position to be successful here, to be productive here, to be impactful at A&M, and that's on the coaching staff. Because that defensive line struggled at times last year in stopping the run. Struggled at times in really giving up the big play. Struggled at times in getting pressure on the quarterback. But that was a schematic problem. That wasn't an individual player problem. That was a schematic problem. And so what can we do to get these guys to actually produce at the levels that they should be producing that will then lead to more wins, that will then lead to more draft picks? That's the question. Other off-season topic, obviously, is recruiting. Right now, recruiting has been absolutely on fire. Class is currently ranked somewhere in the 3 to 5 range, depending on who you look at. And they brought in a good group of players. 3 offensive linemen, 2 tight ends, 3 linebackers, 3 wide receivers, quarterback, a couple safeties. Strength of this class right now, I think, is the D-line, which, with Elko's not a surprise. He's always had a focus there. And at the defensive backfield, along with a couple of running backs that are big-time players, right? And so, you can see what Elko focuses on, where his focus is, what the sort of program focuses. It's defense, it's the running game, it's the line of scrimmages, right? And those things are important to them. That's how they're going to build this team. And, they're still in the mix for some more guys. More importantly, and we're not a recruiting show, we're not going to get into a lot of that stuff, but as always, the season is going to impact this recruiting class. And so we are now in July. We're about to start fall camp, 2 weeks. Start fall camp, and then we're going to go through the season, and whether the success you have or the lack of success that you have is going to make a difference in this recruiting class. Take it as a fact. This team goes out and goes 10-2, makes the playoffs. That recruiting class is going to get better. We're going to add players. We're going to add guys that are impact players. This team goes 7-5 in the regular season or whatever it is, then there's going to be players that decide that they're going to end up somewhere else, right? They're going to have a chance. Other programs are going to have the chance to take those guys out of this recruiting class. So the production on the field this year is going to have an impact on this recruiting class, right now everything looks great. We're doing a pretty good job. Elko and his staff are taking care of business. The other side of the player acquisition side is the transfer portal, right? And so brought in wide receiver Jordan Wilson out of UH, quarterback Jacob Zeno, UAB, the left Deion Hayes, Colorado, defensive line Sam Pemba out of Georgia, tight end Nate Borkshire out of Nebraska, cornerback Jordan Shaw, Washington, tight end Amari Niblock out of Texas, tight end Micah Riley, Auburn, defensive line Tyler Onyeadin out of Iowa State, defensive line TJ Searcy out of Florida, cornerback Junior Humphrey out of Georgia, wide receiver Mario Carver out of Mississippi State, wide receiver Casey Concepcion out of NC State. So it's a good group of players that are coming in. I think he's also targeting character, a certain character that he's looking for. So far, so good with the way he's put this team together. And then they lose some guys, and I think this is part of something that's been glossed over, over the offseason is the guys that they've lost. Obviously Noah Thomas, everybody's talked about the impact and see what he's going to do over there in Georgia. Wigman lost his job. It's understandable. He's at U of H. That's not going to be. Brunlo Dindy hadn't produced here, hasn't done the things that it was expected of him. It's a 5-star. We'll see what he does in the next level. The guys that and then an offensive line group, which I think is very underrated, and Dewberry, Shanahan, Aki, Herb, all those guys I think are productive type players. Aki's a guy that has never really taken as far as that next step. But the other guys, Dewberry was a big time player as a freshman. Shanahan I think looked good. When he got in there last year, especially, or last year, 2 years ago. Herb, as well as a guy with a lot of potential. So these guys are guys that, could help a program. Now, where the reason that I don't think are as impactful here at A&M is we got 7 returning starters offensive line-wise, right? And we've got a bunch of young guys coming in right behind them that are extremely talented. And so I don't think we feel that as much on the offensive line. On the other hand, at the tight end room, that I think is a big loss. Everybody's touting the guys that are coming in. The guys that are coming in at tight end are not as good as the guys that are going out. I'm sorry to tell everybody, that's just not the case. Jaden Platt and Donovan Green are 2 guys that were phenomenal recruits and big time players, athletic and could do both block and go do things out in the route tree and make plays that way. And the guys we're bringing in have no production in the passing game whatsoever. Micah Riley's an Auburn guy that no catches basically last year, not very many catches. He's more of a blocking guy. Berkshire is kind of a tweener, but he's not, no production coming in. And then you get Knobloch, which had production as a freshman in Alabama, but last year caught like less than 10 balls, right? He doesn't bring that same level of production, and he also isn't a guy that's you're going to line up in the line of scrimmage and have him block for you. So we're not really with that kind of with any expectation to have success. So the idea that they sort of reshaped this tight end room, I'm not sure that they've made it better. Now the good side of that is that Klein hasn't really used a tight end that much, right? Even last year it was 30 some odd catches between the whole tight end group, right? So it's not one of those situations, and we haven't mentioned Melon Nordstrom, obviously, who's also a part of that new tight end room. But I think that tight end room is a group that has taken a step back. It's taken a step back. Now, fortunately for us, I think the receiver room has taken a big step forward, and I think that's where we need to be focused in on receivers and tailbacks as far as what personnel we've got in the room. But at the end of the day, yeah, we've got tight ends out there that we're going to need to have on the field to block, to make the running game better, the scheme through the running game better. And that's going to be the key. Can we get those tight ends out there where every once in a while, yeah, we can use them in some different misdirection type plays or some different things like that, but be able to use those guys in the passing game at times, but more importantly, make sure that they're a fixture and something that's going to help us in the running game. So that's sort of my point there. I do think also, Silla and White never really got on Elko's good side, I guess. We'll see how they do at their next stops. But honestly, I think we've got enough bodies at defensive end, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. That it's going to be okay. But those guys are, I think, big time players. So, and we'll see how they do. Another one is everybody's always complained about the speed at wide receiver. Obviously, over the offseason, we lose Micah Tease as a guy that never got on the field in spite of the speed. So, that's one of those situations where, well, yeah, you can talk about speed at wide receiver, but some of it's not is speed because of the fact it looks slow because of the fact that we're not using those guys to go run deep routes. We're not throwing those things. We're not stretching the field at all. I do think we got a big some help at DB this offseason with Shaw and Humphrey, who both could be starting on this team. Shaw, I think, probably more of a guy that's in the rotation, but getting reps. I think Humphrey's probably the starter opposite of Will Lee at corner. With Chappelle getting a lot of the nickel work. But those guys are gonna help this team. Also receiver, right? Concepcion, I think, is going to be one of your top two guys, and we'll talk more of that through that. But Craver is probably going to be a situational guy that gives you some different looks with some speed looks and some things going downfield. Wilson's a guy I never really talked about, but the U of H transfer more of a big-bodied kid, and we'll see how he develops as well. As far as the guys leaving, wishing them all good luck. I think, like I said earlier, Wigman will have a big year at U of H. So enough about sort of the off season. Let's start to look at what we should expect. And for the 2025 season, I said it before last year. I thought this team last year had enough talent to make the playoffs. I thought this team had enough talent to beat anybody on its schedule. I said they wouldn't, but beat everybody on the schedule. They wouldn't go 12-0, but they had the talent to do so, and they could win every game. I think they showed that, right? They end up losing to Notre Dame in the opener with probably the worst quarterback play you could have probably gotten from, all you probably had all year, probably maybe in the last couple of years. I mean, Connor was horrible, right? And the coaching staff never did anything to sort of change that or help that. They could have brought in Marcel at some point and had the potential to go win that game. Obviously, Connor had issues all year, right? But that was a game that was very winnable based off of how things played out. It did give us a glimpse into some things that we should have known coming into the season. Big plays defensively were huge. We keep on giving those up. That's going to be something we talk about for 25, right? And offensively, that struggle that, with Connor, that obviously should have been a change there to Marcel at some point. But we talked about that last year, and they were right there, right? They should have beat Auburn. It's a team you shouldn't lose to where you're at. This is and if you take Notre Dame and Auburn into the equation, you're a 10-win team, and so that's what we're talking about. Talent is there, facilities are there, the fan base is there, and support is there. So all those things are there. This team in 2025, talented enough, once again, to go win 10 games. I'm tired of hearing this Texas 8-4, right? That's the joke. Not A&M, but 8-4. Texas 8-4 every year, 8-4, so on and so forth. I'm tired of hearing it. And I'm tired of hearing it from our own insiders, right? Texas talking about 8-4 is the likelihood of the record go after this year, right? 8-4, like 9-3 is a good year. No. Don't lower expectations at Texas A&M because the production hasn't been there. Keep the expectations high and force the coaches and the staff over there to make sure that they get there. If they can't get there, they need to move on. Let's go find somebody that can. That's important. The expectations need to be high, and while people then look at us and ridicule us maybe and say, ha, you guys are the same old guys, your expectations are ridiculous, whatever. Okay, that's fine. Ridicule me. But I'm going to keep working and doing everything I can to get to that point and find the people that are necessary in order to get to that point. this is a talent. The talent on this team is enough to win 10 games, and that should be the expectation. Not 8, not 9. Those things are a failure, right? Those are a failure. Elko needs to prove to us that he's getting the most out of his players. 9 wins is a minimum, not an expectation. It's a minimum for an acceptable season. 8 is a hot seat moment. 8 wins is hot seat. Sorry. Don't tell me you need more time. Don't tell me you need more time. This in this era of football, these rosters basically get turned upside down every 2 years. So if you don't win now, you don't keep your players, you don't do the things necessary, you can't build a program and get better. You've got to be able to do it by mountain wins, getting guys on the field and having them be productive so that they stay. And let me tell you, if, and here's where the Mike Elko thing comes into play. Mike Elko, supposedly this defensive genius, the guy that's done all these different things defensively. Well, it's on you, because today he's supposed to be taking over this defense. Supposedly he's taking over the play calling. Supposedly he's getting his hands on it a little bit more this year. He came in after the season last year and he talked about the failures of that defense and that being the cause for some of the issues and that we had at the end of the year. And let's be clear, South Carolina, our defense got shredded. Auburn defense got shredded. And then USC defense got shredded. So it's very clear to me that defense was the problem. So here's my thing. And take this to the bank. If that defense is good, this team will win 10 games. Period. Easy as that. There's no other qualification. The offense is going to be good enough. They led the SEC in scoring against SEC opponents. So, in conference games, Aggies led the SEC in scoring. That offense was good enough. It was good enough to win against Auburn. It was good enough to win, really against USC, even though that's not a conference game, right? So I'm not worried. The offense is not the question here. They are going to be put together well behind an offensive line that's going to allow you to do a lot of different things. Can the defense be good enough for this team to win 10 games? That's on Mike Elko, 100%. 100%. Because fortunately, with what we've got coming back on the offensive line, that's going to be one of the top units in the league. Top units in the SEC. Not only that, it's got depth, right? It's got depth. Great running backs. Obviously, we talk about Marcel Reed and his legs. The wide receiver group, if you ask me, is the one that's being questioned the most. Well, I don't have that many questions about him. Just, we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it because Casey Concepcion has not been here. But that's a guy that's going to be a playmaker for this team. And then the other guy, and here's the guy that I really expect to take a huge leap, and that's Terry Bussey. Now, I'll be honest with you, I kind of see him, and he's just an absolute phenomenal type of athlete. He needs to develop as a receiver, and from last year to this year, I think that's where you're going to get your biggest improvement, because that's a guy that last year spent the fall camp playing defense, and then he was kind of switched over, and it took some time to get him going and get him up to speed. And then Colin Klein still didn't quite get to the point where he was trying to get him the ball as much as I think he probably should, and I think he will this year. And so this year, I think now you've got a guy that's been more developed, that's seen the time that he needs on offense, that started to pick that side of the ball up, and now Colin's got to be able to get him the football and put him in a position to be successful. This, 2025 Texas A&M football is going to be all about big plays. It's going to be all about big plays. Can the defense stop and prevent the big play? They didn't last year. I believe they gave up 60 plays of 20 or more yards. They didn't do it last year. They gave it up in the running game. They gave it up in the passing game. That was the biggest issue with this defense, and it's caused oftentimes by all the shifting post-snap movement. Post-snap, right? The twists, the stunts, all the rolls and different things that they do with their secondary, causing issues because they're creating gaps in the defense. The late movement is creating gaps in the defense that is giving the opposing offense an opportunity for a big play, because it's either a big play for the defense where they're able to create a negative play, or it's a big play for the offense. And that's the situation with this defense right now. Well, this year it has to convert into a situation where, especially first and second down and running situations, where they're playing a little bit more sound. They're playing a little bit more gap integrity. They're allowing their players to play instead of sitting there and doing all the shifting and different things that Elko and his coaching staff like to do. It's time to let those guys just be ballers. Go put pressure on the guys with those defensive ends up on the edge. Go put pressure from those guys with your defensive tackles in the middle. And yes, are you going to implement some blitzes and different things? Of course, but do those things more on the third down and try to dial it back, not all the way, but dial it back. Let your players play fast. Let them be very comfortable in the system. Don't slow them down by thinking, right? And can they do that to a certain extent to where they can prevent the big plays? Offensively, can they create those big explosive plays? What's going to happen with the passing game and that and that wide receiver group, right? The tailbacks, are you going to use a guy like Owens in the passing game in order to get him the ball out in space with some maybe blocking out in front, the screen game? Are you going to do some things where maybe some misdirection where then you come back to him on the other side? Are you going to do some things with some play action and maybe have him go out on a route, two backs with Le'Veon Moss as well back there, and maybe have Owens then come out of the backfield to create some big plays down the field as well? Are you going to give Terry Bussey those opportunities to play one-on-one on the outside, right? Because that guy's a phenomenal athlete. He's a better athlete than the guy across from him. Can you give him some opportunities to do that? Use some double moves. Use some misdirection. Use some rubs and different things with the other wide receivers in order to make sure some route concepts to get that guy open and get him some chances down the field. Same with Casey Concepcion. Are we going to give him the opportunity to make plays in the passing game, right? And using play action and different things like that in order to do it, right? So big plays, creating big plays, explosive plays on offense. That's not to diminish also the running game, right? Which last year produced lots of big plays for the Aggies. They need to continue to do that. And so you're only going to help that running game by putting it over the top, opening up the offense as far as long plays, explosive plays, force a defense to defend the entire field. Part of that now, we talk about Marcel's improvement. Last year he struggled a little bit with the long ball. This year, get him more comfortable, make sure he's getting those passes out, and I think he's going to take a step forward in that area. But once again, you need to make some of those a little bit easier on. And then, so we talk a lot about, we've talked some about now the defense and what they need to do. Well, they need to stop the big plays. Offense, what do they need to do? They need to generate some explosive plays. Some of that's going to be on Klein. I think that offensive line gives you the baseline for this offense to be good right now. The running game is going to do that, and then obviously we're going to add in some of those passing schemes that we're talking about. Make things look the same. A lot of the play action, a lot of the screens and stuff like that. Being able to use those things, trick plays. Don't be afraid of those. To create big plays. And if you do that, this team is going to win 10 games. Let me just say that flat out. This team will win 10 games if those things happen. Now, we also got to take a moment here and remember, hey, look, we got to look into this. Has got to be a program that we're not just having one great year here in 2025, right? We want this to be a sustained program. Well, next year we're going to lose 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen potentially, right? Well, if that's the case, let's be prepared. Let's be prepared by giving some of those younger guys some reps. So what does that mean? That means you got to get guys like Afua and Borden and Funk and Ivy and Rogers and McGuire and Newman, those young guys. You got to get them in there for reps, for meaningful reps in SEC games against tough competition. Does that mean you're going to play a whole half with them or a whole quarter with them? No. But you got to get them reps because they got to start experiencing those things. They got to start seeing what it is to be out on the field in the midst of a crowd on a road game in the SEC. How to handle that, how to play that. And it can't be one play, two plays. It's got to be a series, right? You got to give them a chance to work through some things and maybe even a couple of series at times. But those guys need to start getting reps so that they know that they're the next one's up. And they start already feeling it. By the time they get their first snap next year, they've already accomplished some things, right? Those guys need to be able to do that because right now you got Zoom, DeSantis, Reed Adams, Crownover, Father. All those guys are likely to be gone next year, right? Don't wait till next year to start developing next year's talent. Get these guys reps. Do a little bit of a rotation. Do things like that. You know, maybe even have some of those guys take some snaps with some of the first team guys, right? Not all don't make it all the backups all at once, but maybe one drive. Afua's in there with some of the other guys, right? One guy, Funk is in there. Rogers is in there. All those things, right? And be able to rotate them in because we need those guys to be ready next year. That same thing goes for the running back group. Top 4 running backs potentially could leave after this year. Owens could come back. But Le'Veon's probably gone. Amari's gone. You know, Smith is gone. Let's get Ryden and Morrow some reps, right? Reps running behind that number 1 offensive line. See what things look like in full speed NCAA SEC competition, so that next year when those 2 guys are the 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, or 1A and 1B or whatever, they've already seen it. We're not having to rebuild, right? We're just reloading guys that have played. Wide receivers, guys, we need those guys out there playing. Bethel Roman, Miles, Johnson, Williams, all those guys need to be getting reps this year. And you can rotate wide receivers all the time, right? And so it's important to start doing those things and getting those guys in there so that next year we don't have a fall off in the situation. Concepcion's gone or whatever, right? DBs, tons of talent in the defensive backfield. Johnson, Beal Goins, Curry, Sellers, Pettaway, Davis, Pride. Davis needs to be a part of this rotation right now. Like he should be in every other series, right? That guy needs to be playing. And so that's big. But when you guys got, you know, Anderson, Lee, Chappelle, they're probably all gone next year. Those guys are starters. Let's start getting some reps for these young guys and making sure that next year they're ready to jump in and be the main guys, right? I think defensive line, you get the same sort of situation. You know, we talked about some of the depth. You know, a lot of people are worried about the interior or whatever, but the fact is that, you know, on the edge, you know, Williams, Jackson, Evans, Sims, Sanders, Marcus Jones, Rink, all those guys, defensive line-wise, are young players with a lot of talent that need to start seeing the field a little bit. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing because now you're creating not just success for this year, but success for next year, so on and so forth. Let me reiterate this. This team will win 10 games if the defense is good. Not even great, good, avoid big plays, and this team will win 10 games. That is the goal. Quick note just on all SEC, voted in during SEC Media Days. We got 6 in, Le'Veon Moss, the only first teamer. Got a couple of second teamers in the offensive line, and Adams and Zune. And we got a third teamer from the offensive line, DeSantis. Defensively, a couple of guys. Also, Lee, second team, and then York in third team. You know, great for those guys. I love the recognition. I think all those guys have the potential to be there at the end of the year. And a couple of guys that I think need to, but there's other guys that can be recognized by the end of the year. Anybody on that offensive line can end up being first, second, or third team in the SEC. I think that's the kind of talent that we have up front. Le'Veon Moss is another one. Obviously, Owens, if he comes in and he's healthy and he finally can get into producing and doing his thing, that guy's another guy that has the opportunity. But a guy that I believe in is Terry Bussey as well. I think he has a Concepcion as an opportunity to be there at the end of the year. Both of those guys do offensively, defensively. I mean, how? DJ Hicks, and I think Brooks are guys that weren't necessarily mentioned there that have an opportunity to do so. So how about Humphrey on the other corner as well? So Chappelle, a guy at nickel, can be a big part of that. So there's a lot of other guys that can end up, if this team has success, can end up being in that All SEC talk at the end of the season. Next is questions from the tailgate. So we'll close it out with questions from the tailgate. Brought to you by Matthews Electric, full service electrical contractor in Brazos Valley. No job too big, no job too small. Call Blaine at 979-220-6403. Light up your home, light up your life. So a player on each side of the ball that needs to have a big impact. I mean, offensively, I think the easy answer is Marcel Reed, right? He needs to have a big impact on this team. I think that's easy. Are there other guys that need to have an impact? I mean, the offensive line needs to be good, but I think Marcel Reed's the answer, right? If he has a big impact, this team's going to be great offensively. Defensively, I think it's DJ Hicks. I think he has to be that 5-star guy that he was as a recruit that come in and is going to create havoc from inside out on this defense, right? We've got some guys that I've talked about on the edge with Howell, with Williams, with Kennedy that can bring some pressure on the outside, TJ Searcy, Dayon Hayes, and there's another one, there's guys, right? And so you've got some depth on the outside, that's already there. I think from the inside, Hicks has got to be a big time disruptor. He's got to be a guy that takes everything, the pressure off the rest of this defense. He can make him and Albert Regis, Evans, another guy, right, can make a big difference on this defense, giving the linebackers an opportunity to make plays, giving those defensive ends an opportunity to be one-on-one and make some plays on their own. So I think it's DJ Hicks. And then what is the expectation for Marcel Reed? I think I've said it all along today. Big year, and year number 2 as the guy there. But it also depends on Klein, right? And big year doesn't necessarily mean big passing numbers. It means lots of wins, right? And he can sit in there and they can run the football and create big plays over the top with play action. But Klein has to do a better job putting him in a position to be successful, and gives him some nice play designs to be able to create explosive plays, that are out there, whether it's some play action, some double moves, some trick plays and things of that nature, some misdirection and all those types of things. But obviously, I think he's going to have a big year, and you should expect for him to be in consideration for some All-SEC team awards as well. All right, Ags, first episode back. We'll get another one in soon. Signing out from the tailgate. See you later, fellas. Giggle.